Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to continue on with this week's theme, exploring the genre of post-metal. We're going to check out a band today that I don't think I've ever heard before and don't even think I've even come across the name of the band, that being Pelican. Specifically, we're going to be looking at something off of their 2003 debut album, Australasia, which I hope I'm pronouncing that right. We're looking at the track Drought. Let's dive in and see what Pelican has in store for us today. This is very compressed, massive guitar tones, a very claustrophobic production overall. Probably about 73 BPM. Interesting drum thing there. It almost felt like they were falling out of time. Oh, it looks actually closer to exactly 60 BPM. Nice small change up to the riff, just to push the song forward a little bit while retaining that same energy and flair. Time is also very malleable. We seem to bump up and reduce down the BPM by just like 3 to 5 every once in a while. Just a hair bit faster, a hair bit slower. See, there's a little bit of a tempo boost there. Nice bit of harmony there. The dyads on the guitar, we haven't heard much of that at all. Dude, it feels like this is a massive, a gradual, continuous slowdown of the tempo, but it's actually not moving at all. That's part of the malleability I was talking about. That was fun. Okay, yeah, this is some much needed dynamic element to the song. Ooh, yeah, our pedal tone. Yeah. Well, that song being labeled or titled Drought is accurate. I definitely thirsted for something else that wasn't in that song at all. And every minute that continued on without this other component, I found myself wanting it, nay, needing it more and more. This is a drought of melody. Now, I don't know if this is necessarily what they're going for. This could just be very general Pelican music. And the drought is entirely something else, intentional as far as authorial intent is concerned. But for me, I absolutely felt like wading through a sonically atmospheric wasteland devoid of melody and hoping around every corner, every drum fill, every a little transition that what we get next will have some melodic component to it. And we don't. It's a total Drought. The song stays within its atmospheric, textural, chord-based approach. Now, there are riffs to this. It's not like they're just playing straight chords, but the riffs themselves tend to be a bit muted. 2 to 3 notes tops, and it really is mostly the pitch difference between them being more important than melodic movement, being more important than rhythmic diversity. A lot of this song focuses on a very simple, not simple, well, yeah, I mean, it's simple, but straightforward, repetitive rhythmic device. There is, fortunately, accent points in here where, despite having a bunch of eighth notes over and over and over, some of them have a bit more of a pulse than others, which creates a little bit of syncopation in that regard. But for the most part, this does the thing. It does a thing over and over and over and over. Variations of the thing, but never really diverting too far from that core idea. The riffs that we heard at the end of the song, while not being the riff we heard at the beginning of the song, very similar. You could easily trace the thread of evolution that got us from one point to the other, and that's true for pretty much every new riff on this track. And I do bring up riff as in single because the bass and the two guitars are always on the same wavelength. You really get the full width and power of having all these instruments together. We do occasionally have some harmonized ideas where a second guitar will play a dyad alongside the first, but we don't have counterpoint, we don't have dual ideas, we don't have melody on top of the riff, we don't have the bass doing a walking bass line. Everything is total unification. It really crafts the singularity of scope, which I think absolutely nails the idea of, when I think of a drought, I think of something like a desert, where there's no water and the land itself is dry because of that. And when you picture a desert, it's just sand in every direction, the same color, the same landscape. It doesn't really matter which way you look. It all kind of looks the same. And I think that's what this song does really well, between its use of variations on the opening riff and the unification of sound where all the instruments are working on the same thing. It really comes across as this one vast, similar in every way feeling, just being locked in the middle of this where every direction looks the same. But then we also have the production on this track, and it is massive. Each of the instruments is big, large, tons of compression, tons of overdrive. I will say, though, that the production is a bit compressed. It feels very closed in. It fits for 2003. It also fits as a debut album. I don't know how big they were. I don't know what kind of financial situation they were in. Maybe this was recorded, in their bedroom or in their attic or something like that. I think that this would absolutely benefit from a larger sound sphere, less compression on the track as a whole. But it still, as the ear acclimates to it, it ends up working fine. Like I said, I still think it could be improved, but I don't think it ever felt too small in scope. And I think a lot of that just comes down to the size of the instruments themselves. But something about the guitar tones, the size of them, sure, but the tones too, that creates this weight. These instruments are large and vast, but they feel heavy too. You can make very large guitar tones that soar, but that's not what happens here. And part of it is probably the lower end focus too. We don't really have anything. I mean, we have a couple of those interesting higher stingers that we get, a couple of pedal tones and then a higher pitch stinger. Sure, but most of the riffs are focused on this lower feeling. The bass comes in a rumble beneath, the bass kick itself, very muddy. Again, another thing where I think the production kind of hurts it a little bit, but the muddiness of the bass when we have those constant eighth note bass kicks, I mean, that just fills out this lower end. It makes it feel just like so much weight, pure heavy metal. And because of all of this working together, the song feels very oppressive. If the composition is what gives it its expansive uniformity, the production is what makes it feel oppressive, a place that is the same in every direction, but that you're not going to escape from. And that's what I think the combination of those two really gives the desert vibes on this. There's also the drums. They are very functional. And I know that can kind of come across a little negative, but I want to focus on this, that I'm using that term in a bit more of a neutral way. The drums don't have a lot of flourish to them. There's not that many drum fills in here. There's not that many interesting or unique like melodic drum elements. Even the rhythms themselves tend to really focus on beats 2 and 4 or 1 and 3 or all 4 beats. It really is about, crafting the pulse for a section. And that's it. Very no frills, straightforward. It does its job, human metronome style. But it's perfect. And this is why I want to kind of, focus on that word a bit more in a neutral, objective stance. Because I think when you say, an average person says, it was functional, it got the job done. There's kind of like this negative element to it. But sometimes getting the job done is exactly what something needs thematically or artistically. The drums being as straightforward as they are, being as repetitive as they are, just locking into the beat and hitting it, it presents once again this feeling of uniformity, of formation. It also presents something a bit overbearing. Maybe it's just me because I really value novelty and dynamics and contrast in music, but having the drums sort of just lock in and do that thing for multiple minutes straight before changing up to a different drum pattern, it really leans itself into presenting a sort of monolithic element. If the guitar composition, all the guitars coming together playing one thing creates a singularity, this is like a unification of all of it too. It adds to this idea that it doesn't matter how far you go in any direction, you can walk for 3 hours straight ahead, and when you look around, it's all just going to be the same again. This is a way of the drums sort of doing the same thing that the rest of the instruments are doing. Whereas we're getting a singularity from all of them working together and doing one thing, the drums, we get this uniformity from, not really having a lot of contrast to it. If you walk through a desert, you're not really going to see a lot of variety. Maybe, a new cactus or something. The hills, the waves of the desert are going to be different. But that's about it. Not going to be a lot of contrast, visual contrast to that. And I think the drums locking into like their groove for such a long time per section, again, it emphasizes the uniformity, the singularity of all of this. All of this works together to create this feeling of drought. And again, there's no melody. The one thing I crave in music. I can listen to music that's devoid of rhythm. It's tough. I could get around to it. I could listen to music that doesn't have strong atmosphere. Good groove, good melody, you're going to catch me on that. But I have a really tough time listening to music that removes melody. I felt like I was in a drought here because of that. But it's actually emphasized another way, too. Going back to the desert metaphor, you have no water. Maybe the first 30 minutes isn't that bad, but I'd wager an hour, 2, 3, half a day, a whole day into this journey, you're going to find that it's harder on your body. You're stumbling more often, missing your step, feels like your legs are giving out. You just get exhausted. And you don't have the water in your body that you need for everything to function optimally. We have rhythmic things in here that kind of embody that. Time is very loose, which is impressive given that I believe this is a full band, right? We do have parts where the time jumps. We'll be at 60 BPM here, then 70 for this section, and then we'll come back to something at 60 again. Little different variation on the riff, but still this slower feeling. And then maybe we'll bump up to like 80, and then back down to the 70, and then hit the 60 again. Like, tempo-wise, there's definitely these points where this section is faster or slower than where we just were, or where we're going next is a little faster or slower. But when you listen to individual riffs, there's also loose timing to those too. I mentioned about 6 minutes into the track that it felt like we were in a constant retardando, a slowing down of the tempo over a set of time. This was because the middle somewhere of this riff, it felt like the whole band was slowing down. The beat just was a little behind where I expected it to be based on my, internal feeling of the tempo. And it did this consistently. Beat 2 of this bar always felt like it dragged a little bit. We would speed back up, but it always felt like we were dragging more and more. And it felt like the song was just slowly dipping in speed, but it never did. We just had this temporary fluctuation every once in a while that dropped the tempo down. Normally, I'd call this out. I'd say, hey, there's some temporal issues here. The band needs to tighten up and, put some more rehearsal time in. But honestly, I think this is the product of rehearsal. Like I mentioned, this is 4 people all playing together. And they're all dipping at the same time for the same length and coming back together. There weren't any places in here really where I would say, oh, the drums came in on the beat and everyone else was behind them. The rest of the band's dragging. Or, the bass came in early every beat for a while. They were rushing. They need to slow it. No, everybody is always in sync at all times here. These micro fluctuations in tempo seem intentional, but it also feels like the faltering of the body during a drought, during a time of no water, as the brain and the muscles begin to become less functional, tripping over yourself, you're, like I said, leg giving out, you kind of got to like stumble for a second. That's what they all feel like. It isn't just a song that I think paints the picture really well of a desert atmospherically, but also incorporates the elements of the journey through this desert in the temporal elements. I find that really fascinating. It's not a song that I enjoyed. I think me bringing up contrast and dynamics and novelty a couple of times, you probably could have guessed that. Post-metal, even post-rock, it's a genre I have a tough time getting into. This was certainly not a song that I would say I casually enjoyed, but I think from an artistic or thematic direction, it does a fantastic job of not just doing what it sets out to do, but conveying it very clearly too. And for that, I have nothing but praise for Pelican. But these are just my thoughts on their song Drought. What did you think of this? Did anything stand out? Is there anything you'd like to add on to what I said or correct me on? Maybe you have your own interpretation of things. Let me know. Put all of that and any other thoughts you have down into the comments section. Above that, in the description box is a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all 3 of those. Alright, that wraps it up for today. I'll be back tomorrow though, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.